Okay, good morning everybody. It's Thursday, February 17th, 2022, and we're going to get started here with our pre-market analysis on the S&P 500 futures market. Um, the last few weeks have really been a doozy. For anyone that's intraday trading in here, lots of ambivalent price action, right? We get really strong pushes in the bullish direction that then turn into really strong sell-offs in the bearish direction, and then it just seems to kind of oscillate back and forth like that. And basically, let's see here, going back for the last, 3 weeks, we get these areas of crazy chop, oscillating back and forth. One nice push, and then oscillation back and forth, push, and that's basically what we've seen. So, yesterday, the day before that, just up and down, up and down, up and down. We got one nice move in the middle of the night, but then when the market opened that day, it just was up and down, up and down. And then a few days before that, again, just kind of strong push right up into the open and then a sell off, making it look like we might hold a major level and go off. And then it turns right at the middle of the morning there, and bam, we're right back to the highs. And then an hour or two later, we're right back to the lows. And that's basically what's been happening here for a while. So it's been a difficult market. There are still a lot of really good trades, plenty of scalp setups and opportunities out there. It's just kind of a little bit of a mess for any of those trend traders out there. You're probably getting demolished, right? So you're building your position, maybe you get some off, and the next thing you know, it's back up way above your entry. So let's go ahead and just kind of do our thing. We're going to dial down from the higher time frames down to the intraday. And as you know, back on Monday, we did kind of the weekly larger scale analysis and mapped out all the levels we had kind of above current market price, which I believe we were trading down around here. So everything up above here, we kind of laid out, and then everything down below us, bringing us back into that 42.12, 42.13 low. We kind of mentioned all the levels. And because of all of this sideways chop that we're pulling back into, especially over here. So for the last 3 or 4 days, this bounce out of 43.54, I believe, and this push up. If we start pulling back, we're right back into. So if the market comes down and gets through about 44.20, we're now back into an area that there's just probably 9 or 10 equally valid strong levels that could potentially hold. Let me just go up here. The quarterly, again, we went through this stuff on Monday, hasn't changed. The monthly hasn't changed a bit, and our weekly is still looks exactly the same. If you guys remember back to Monday, I pointed out that I'm just kind of monitoring this pullback here on the weekly because we do technically have a bullish divergence off the weekly low. So it's just something kind of interesting, and um, we need to kind of get all the other time frames in agreement for that push. But right now, I'm still watching. Remember, yesterday, I guess the RVI was a little bit lower, but there we go, right there. So still see it. So I'm still watching that. Now, outside of that, if we could just glance over these high time frames really quickly in terms of the 50% retracements here, the quarterly chart, we're still below 50% of the previous candle and still below 50% of the current candle in progress. Our monthly still below 50% of the previous month, and our weekly still below 50% of the previous week, right? So everything is, from a very general perspective, bearish, being below that critical level, that 50% retracement level. So let's go down into our daily now and take a look. So we got the bounce out, and I think we established this on Monday that we actually hit the 61.8 almost to the tick, and actually came out just like we hit the 38 back maybe a week earlier, and bounced out. We now came down. We actually held the 50 really nicely in here. You just can't see it on the daily, and came down and held the 61, and now we're attempting to bounce out. Now the really interesting thing here is I told at least my members in my trade room, as we were pushing yesterday morning, we actually were finding resistance right off of this marked swing low back from, what was this, December 3rd of 2021. So a few months back, That low there at it was 84.75, and what was the high of yesterday? 84.50. So one tick in front of that swing low, we came up and we rejected, and we're getting this pullback now. So just kind of interesting to note. We did watch that, and in fact, just before the open, we had come up and failed just a few, like a point in front of it, and then I guess at the end of the day, it came right up to 84.50 and then failed. So on the daily here, um, what can I say here? We don't really have any kind of divergences to look at. And we are holding, and this is the thing I told you guys on Monday, we're holding the 61.8 of this whole sell-off from the all-time high down to that 42.12 low. We're holding 61.8. We even came up and tried to break through a second time and failed pretty violently. So that's a bearish case for the market. On top of that, we have the bearish case that every single higher time frame we're still stuck below 50% of the candle before it. So a lot of bearish clues. On the flip side of things, though, we got the bounce out. We pulled back and we're still holding 61.8 of the attempt to push higher. So until we actually break below there, we do have a little bit of a bullish argument here. Obviously, everything's really heavy. So, it's easier just to say we're in a bearish market. We can expect lower. I just want to point out that we do have a little bit of that bullish argument holding the 61 right now. Outside of that, on the daily here, I really don't have anything else to add. It does look like we're probably going to retrace all of yesterday's price action here and come down and break, just kind of looking at what's happening here. But again, anything's possible. So let's start going into our intraday time frames and see if we can't find anything. I want to warn you guys that, and I've been saying this, I think even since Monday, that we're in a super kind of what's the word for it? There's a lot of consolidation. There's a lot of two-sided trading going on. So as we pull back, you just have to be warned. You just have to be kind of comfortable with the fact that there's just a whole crap load of stuff down here that we're pushing back into if we do sell off here. So on the 4 hour, what am I noticing? A nice bearish divergence from the previous daily high. Nice bullish divergence from the previous daily low, stuck in a very tight range. So what would I say for this morning? Probably don't want to be trading anywhere within here. So if we continue to trade between about 44.20 and 44.80, you might want to just sit it out. It's just so much stuff in here and so many opportunities, so many different levels that might work that you might end up just chopping yourself up, and there's very limited reward if it continues to be somewhat choppy. I mean, your risk to reward is going to be much lower, right? As opposed to a market that's got a good trend going on, and you could jump in on the direction of the trend and get yourself a 10 or 20 to 1 trade, as opposed to sitting in here and playing with much lower reward to risk, right? What else can we say on the 4 hour here? We mentioned that this was going to be a very important level down here. 43.55 to 43.60 was the expected support, and we held. Again, that was the 61.8 of this smaller leg. But there's a lot of trouble now, and now we have to look at, and this might confuse some of you, but this is just basic Fibonacci analysis. Now that we've got this push up and a rejection, we now need to look at the retracement back up here as this bounces. And if we can't get through the 50 and the 61 of this specific leg right here, that is again a bearish clue, just like we couldn't get through the 61.8 of the larger leg from the high to the low. Right in this little micro area over here, if we zoom in, we're now bouncing out and we can't get through the 50 and the 61 of this. So if you kind of take this little pattern and maximize it, I guess, or multiply the size of it, there's the major top and the major low and the rejection at the 61.8 in the bigger sense, right? And then in the smaller sense here, here's the high, the low, and the rejection right around the 61. So there's the bearish case over there. And now we're just going to have to kind of zoom in and take a look at all the levels. So hopefully this is a good zoomed out view, giving you an idea of what's going on. Super ambivalent. super ambivalent, and super tight and choppy. Let's go in and look at our levels now. So we've got, again, holding right around 50 to 61 of the push down here with these two bearish signals right now has led to the pullback here in the overnight session. Now notice where we're playing around. All of yesterday happened between this green and this red line, and we're still within there. You see how much chop and garbage and sideways action is going on here? That's why I'm telling you it makes sense to probably be hands off in this part of the chart. Will there still be scalps? Will there still be opportunity for money making? 100%. I just don't think it's just a little bit more risky. And I tell my traders this all the time. If you're trading uh, in a professional manner, this is your business, right? So what I say is if you're running a business and you've got to pay for rent or and pay for utilities and pay for employees to be there, would you want to run your business on a day when nobody's really around? Christmas Day, how many people are going to be going out for, lunch and stuff on Christmas Day? Probably a very small amount, maybe Jewish people and other faiths, but for the most part, Christmas Day pretty quiet. There are some other days throughout the year that are very, very quiet. People are typically hanging out with family, doing their thing. Do you want to pay your employees and pay the utilities to keep your business open if you're probably going to end up operating at a loss for that day? It doesn't make sense. It's similar in this fashion in the market. If it's one of those days that's going to be slow, that's going to be tight, it's going to have a lot less opportunity for larger winning trades, maybe you should make the business decision to not trade, or at least just watch the charts and wait for something to really set up. Maybe once you get outside of that area of business that doesn't make sense. So that might be one of these days. In fact, a lot of days for the last 2 or 3 weeks might have been those kind of days. So let's look here. Like I said, just a crap load of stuff. As the market pulls back here, the main area that I told everybody yesterday made sense to me was all of this resistance back from, it must have been Monday. Let's see. Yeah, I think back from Monday here, we really couldn't get through 44.20. And that was kind of the major resistance. We had 2 attempts, 3 attempts to kind of break out from there, could not. And we also have the 50% retracement of the whole push up from this low and our eye level all sitting right there. So yesterday we talked about if there was a pullback, I think 15 to 20 was a good little zone for some type of interaction here, for some type of bounce. Now the problem is, as we get down back into below 15 here, 15 and 20, we now get into a whole bunch of crap down in here. So what do we have? And you're going to have to just bear with the fact that we're pushing back into another chop zone. We have this next little zone down here, which is just about the 61.8 and our eye level here at 98. That's another little zone that would not be surprising to see some type of reaction from. Just like in the past, we've highlighted these levels and the market comes down into it, tests the region and gets some type of larger turn or rotation. Those are the two areas I would expect that to happen here. Now, you have to keep in mind that as we pull back, it's going to be super, a lot of levels in here. So there's a couple other things to note. There is this little zone here where we got the really strong rip out of right here. And then it's right back into 61 and the lows from, I guess, the lows of this week. I think this was in the Globex going into the morning of the 14th of Monday. Yeah. So basically the lows of this week would be that next zone of potential support. And I could just go ahead and drag this over. This is an area we've been watching for a long time. So when we came down and found support here back on Monday in the overnight session going into Monday morning, that was not surprising. So these are the major zones we're looking at down below us. And what I'm going to have to do here is go to the intermediate time frame so we can look at this pullback here. So let's take a look. This was the trade I mentioned. I tried long here just before we started our session. So we're finding really good support right where we would expect it to be, right in the two eye levels in the CP there. Pretty nice little region to bounce from. But let's take a look here. Let's go to the 30 and see what we have as we pull back. And like I said, it's super messy in here. Here are the boxes I put on the chart yesterday. Same exact ones we're looking at for this morning because we never really came back to test them yet. So we've got those two zones. Again, we've got the 61, maybe down to the actual swing low there, right over here. So these are little 5-point ranges that make sense to see some type of bounce out of. And what I would urge you to do this morning, if you're looking to play into these areas, it might make sense, again, assuming that we get a nice bearish setup here and something like coming up off the back end of one of the levels, you might want to get short and take profit down in some of these regions rather than trying to buy every single level here, because you could end up getting, death by a million cuts. Every level you're trying the top of the shaded region, you're trying the bottom end on each of these. On the way down, you could end up getting into a little bit of trouble. So I like to be short into these kind of regions of the chart rather than trying to buy out of them, because there's just so many things down here that make sense. It's hard for me to really put weight on one or the other, right? We've got 50 eye level and previous major resistance, but we also have the 61 and eye level and pretty good resistance down over here as well. So, it's basically a coin toss. We'll just have to see what the market does. If they end up pulling back through 98, you also can't ignore, I highlighted this on the higher time frame chart, this little section right here. So that lower CP and maybe a little bit deeper than that into the actual swing low there around 84, that also makes sense. And again, I wish it wasn't as kind of messy and constricted, I think is the best word. I wish it wasn't as constricted down in here, but that's just the way it is. So those are the little regions we're going to want to watch here if the market does continue to sell off. There's no real strong case that we could expect the market to bounce and hold the previous daily low and break out to the upside. There's also no strong case that we're going to hold the previous daily high and actually come down into this constricted region down here. So we're basically just going to have to see who wins out. It's been almost 3 days worth of sideways chop. So we're going to have to see who wins out. And I think that's basically it. We can go down and look at the IOTA, the really small stuff here, and look, there's so many different things in here that could end up holding. If 98 doesn't hold and the KP doesn't hold, and then the 61 to 54 area doesn't hold, that's going to open up a whole bunch down below us that I don't want to get into. So this morning, we're just going to have to focus in on these general areas. And I'm going to go ahead and put them here on the 10-minute chart. And then I think that's basically it for today. It feels like almost every Thursday morning I come in and we're stuck in a constricted zone with no clear indication of direction. And it's just been like that for like almost every time I come in and do this. And that's just how the market's been lately. So I got those regions up, and then also don't forget we've got this CP down into the lower end, and there happens to be an eye level and a KP at the lower end of that general shaded region that comes back to, where did I derive that from? This area right here where the market held and got this really strong rip out in the overnight. So might be a lot of buyers still kind of hanging out over there. And I think that's really it. I don't think that there's much else to add to the picture here. It's just really messy, and it seems to me like it's another day to kind of take it easy and wait for things to shake out and get us into some better market conditions for trading. So have a great rest of your day, guys. If you're interested in joining us in the trade room, send me a message. We'll try to work something out. And hope you guys have a good trading session. Again, beware. This is not really. And you know what? One other thing I'm noticing in this kind of market, I'm kind of digressing here, but the levels are still working fairly well, but it's getting fairly noisy, right? So levels are holding to the tick in many instances. In fact, a really nice stair step down here in the overnight session, holding the back end of a lot of these levels and coming lower. But there's a lot of instances where we are just whipping right through. It doesn't matter if it's a prediction point or one of the eye levels we use in my room, just kind of really whipping through things. So, coming up, whipping through, not using the level at all, and then coming back and holding it within 2 points. So it's messy. So I'll probably be pretty conservative here on my trades this morning and very aggressive with my trade stops. So I want to see the market hit my level, pull out of it, and if it doesn't start going, I'm just getting out because of what's happening here. So have a great morning, and I will be back on Monday so we can do our larger time frame analysis and get started with the week, mapping the market out. So have a great day, guys. See you later. Bye bye.